Hello, everyone. Welcome into today's session, Leading Through Influence, Unlocking the Formula to Better Partnership and Stakeholder Buy-in, presented by our Head of Leadership Growth here at Educate 360, Dr. Jay Pugh. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be moderating today's session. We are on Zoom for today's session, and we will be emailing you a copy of this recording after the webinar. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 and Watermark Learning are so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. J.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Mariella, and really appreciate everybody joining for today. And just as Mariella mentioned, I'm our head of leadership growth with Educate 360 and Watermark Learning, Dr. J. Pugh. Been in this space for almost 2 decades, and I'd love to see a lot of people join in. If we can, I'd just like to do a quick test of the chat and the dialogue. If we just want to send a quick reaction, a quick thumbs up. Quick type in the chat, quick hello, just to let me know that that's working. I do love to make these interactive for those that have been a part of this. Just let me know if this has been your first time, or if this is or if this is a multiple time that you've been with me. I always like to know if this is good, excellent, very good, excellent, excellent. Good, good. Well, if this is the first time you've been with me, welcome, welcome. If this is multiple times, thanks for coming back and joining me. It's always a pleasure. I always like to have fun with you all as we've done this. The main goal for today that we're going to dive into is really making sure that as we're leading with influence, one of the key things that we don't get to talk about enough of is strategic dialogue, strategic buy-in, and partnership. How does that still tie with partnership? And so, as we get into this, one of the things we're going to talk about is engagement. One of the key words we are going to talk about is how do we engage our stakeholders a lot more strategically without manipulation, without um, negative influence, but doing it in a way to where everybody gets to win. How do we really make sure that that happens? And so I want us to think of how do we really prepare for dialogue first and foremost. We are going to start to think about the art of preparation. So when we have important dialogues coming up, how do we really prepare for dialogues to make sure that they're influential? Are there any go-tos that you make sure that you know if I prepare for this, this is going to be successful? What do we do? What do you currently do as a go-to? Give everybody a moment to see what they type in the chat. Knowing the audience. I love that. Yep, we have to know the audience. We have to know what their needs are. Maybe anticipating questions might be really great. I would love that to start. Yeah, understanding goals, expectations. We have to also set our own expectations for these things. I would fully agree with that. Matching tone. I love the idea of matching vibe. I love seeing that too. Matching the vibe. Yeah, I really like the idea of, leading with positive intent, leading with positivity, weighing importance, matching tone, watching jargon. I really like the idea of what I always like to consider with jargon is does my audience have the knowledge and awareness that they're walking into? I like the idea of reading information. And I don't mean reading information off of slides. And I know Kathy doesn't mean that either. What Kathy means is, are we reading their behavior in real time as that's going? I really like the idea of visualizations. Are we presenting the right information? Do we really make sure that when we're presenting information that all stakeholders are getting something out of this? So I love this as an approach in the way that we're breaking this down on knowing what sort of go-tos we make sure exist. What's really fantastic about this is there's a couple notes that I'm getting out of this that come into play. Number one is that there's sort of this idea of really knowing our audience. The A is the audience, anticipating their questions, really anticipating their needs, laying out their expectations, Knowing those sort of things are going to be really important. Knowing that we have the right stakeholders, the right audience members are going to be here. I love this. The other piece that comes into play is the right content. So, the right agenda, the right ideas, the right content, the right information is being shared, the right expectations. There is one other thing that I really always like to make sure of that is not left behind, and it's the why. And I don't mean just the why is we're here, but one thing that I always like to make sure of is also very clear is yourself. And when I mean yourself, there is a huge piece of strategic engagement that goes into play, and that is you. So, one course that we really spend time really teaching, and it is, believe it or not, our number one selling course, even above our business analysis course, which is a highly popular course, and influencing without authority, which is a very high popular course. One of our number one selling courses is a course called Mastering Meaningful Engagement. And one of the reasons why it is because it lays out a factor of how do you know if you're hitting your targets if you have no idea where you're standing first? So it's not just a self-awareness course or an emotional intelligence course. It really is a strategic understanding course of if somebody is here versus somebody is here, am I speaking the same language that they are, or do I need to really strategically adapt to where they are? And so knowing yourself and the way you deliver a message becomes imperative. Oh, and sorry, the somebody just asked the name of the course is it's Mastering Meaningful Engagement. It really is about stakeholder understanding, stakeholder buy-in, but it's also about knowing one key component of this is how do I really know why people listen to me? So I'm going to ask you all a very loaded question. And you don't have to answer this right now because I don't believe in putting people on that kind of a spot. Why does anyone, and I don't mean just at work, why does anyone truly listen to you as a human being? And what's really amazing is human beings. If you got married, guess what? You got buy-in. That partner. And that's somewhat, Philip, you're right. Somewhere along the line, they got us, right? It could be that we're knowledgeable on a topic to start, but there's deeper trust, there's connection on a deeper level. See where this goes? It's not just surface layer anymore. There's no more surface layer. See, it could be knowledge on a topic, but then it goes deeper than that. The real reason why strategic engagement really happens, and I'm going to let the cat out of the bag, is that it's not that you just get it, it's that you get them. But you have to know yourself first. So I'll be very candid and I'll even go to a moment of vulnerability with you all. I know myself. I know that I'm highly passionate. I know that I am direct. I know that I am straightforward. I know that I am highly enthusiastic about things. I am a gunner. I am high octane in my approach. So, and Erica, thank you. Now, once again, if I'm not like you, also guess what? Thank you. And I say that truly because for this reason. With Erica, I don't have to move much in strategic engagement to get buy-in. I don't have to move. But is there anybody that's like, man, that does not sound like me at all? I am more reserved. I am more observational. I take things in a little bit more. I gather a little bit more. I'm a little bit more subdued. And Heather, that's perfect. Chandler, perfect. Teresa, perfect. Well, guess what I might need to do? I need to adapt my approach. And that requires me to make a longer string of movement to meet people where they are to get buy-in. So with Erica, I might need to ramp up, whereas with Chandler, I might need to take a half step back. So engagement is about not losing your authenticity, but it is about understanding and pivoting to your audience's needs. But if you don't know where you're standing first, how do you know when you're hitting your targets? How many of you are like, mind already exploded? And what's crazy about this is that we already do disc assessments and we do TRACOM social styles and we do insights and we do so many other types of assessments that are out there. But one thing it doesn't teach us is real strategic adaptation and making it meaningful. And so when we talk about real influence and real buy-in for people, one of the things we have to key into is how do we know when people are really bought into us? And we hear these things, and I love what Angelica mentioned is someone truly listens when they're able to connect, or there's this desire to understand, or you know what they're you're Philip mentions like you're saying really something that they want to hear, or they really grip something that's with you. And so what I've spent years really dedicating to is understanding what layers look like. And Valerie, you're right. Feedback is absolutely one of them. So, what comes into this is I'm going to teach you the deepest layers of the surface to the dark, to sort of the deepest. But how many of us, and Dominic, that's one layer, right? Is asking the follow up or the clarifying questions. That's one of the layers. So, this is one of the things that come into play is we look for things that how many of us, by a show of hands or a reaction, have you sat in a meeting and you've gotten silence, which is compliance, but then you might have gotten 38 questions after a meeting and nobody was aligned, right? We've seen it. We've seen it. And so that's compliance. But when we look for things like commitment, there are different clues and cues that tell us what that looks like. And so when I go further, one thing that I spend a lot of time in teaching people is how to look deeper, how to go deeper with your audience, how to really look for what buy-in looks like for them. And so what we have a tendency to do, and Velvet, and please correct me because I don't want to mispronounce. If it's Velvet, I really love that. It's correct. If they may not feel the environment safe, then what that means is that we haven't created a space of clarity in that case. You're absolutely right. Okay, perfect, perfect. So in this case, what I try to do to break down the walls of buy-in for people is I have to break down each of the rungs of this triangle to remove. So the first one is what is called engagement and captivation. And captivation is the art of finding your in with them, finding your in. The next layer is depth, and depth means understanding, that there's sort of this layer of understanding, that it makes sense. The next one, though, and this is a rung that normally gets skipped, is alignment. That we're on the same page, that we're moving in the same direction. And the more that you can break through this wall of buy in consistently, the more that you can achieve trust and connection with another person. So when I look for buy in with stakeholders, partners, we build leadership and development programs, and it's the reason why I think we've created and sustained partnerships for year after year after year is because we've consistently aligned. And when we weren't aligned, we worked towards alignment year after year. So I'm going to give you the secret sauce for today on what that looks like. So captivation simply looks like invested attention. And I'll tell you that even though I can't send you, even though I can't see you right now, the fact is that I know that there's presence and focus right now. I know that there is things like response time because you all are typing in the chat. I know that there is eyes gravitating. Even though I can't see you, I know that it's there. I've seen response time in the chat. But when we're in meetings, there is body language. If people are on camera, there's eye contact. There's what we call tracking. We teach a lot of different mechanisms in this class on what do you look for in the remote space when that happens. Face to face, there's other mechanisms that you look for. But what you're really looking for is this element of presence and focus from your audience. Are they in? That's the first layer. And if they're in with you, you move down a rung. And now your goal is to get to a layer of invested understanding. And invested understanding looks like depth. This is where they start going to learning and processing. And this is what I really like that I heard, from Velvet mentioned something and Dominic mentioned something to where they're like, yeah, do you know what? They're going to ask some clarifying questions, or they might be writing down notes. And I know that there's people right now that are probably jotting down notes right now. They're putting pen to paper. And it's like, how does he see me? He doesn't. I promise. I don't. But I know that it's occurring because there's learning and there's processing. There might be clarifying questions, or there's even some examples that may come into play here. And that's what I love that Velvet mentioned was this idea of saying, well, this could be because they may not feel comfortable enough to ask because that psychological safety is not there. Absolutely. If that's there, it might be that, you know what, they don't understand that the environment's safe enough yet to do so. And Scott mentions a really key point is why does this matter to me? So this now transitions, Scott, from a space of no, 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 I get it. I understand it perfectly. I get it. It's almost like, does this make sense? Sure. But now we don't have the deeper layer, which is why does this matter? What it's the Whiffum effect, right? It's the what's in it for me. What's in it for me? Or what's in it for us? Or what's in it for the team? Or what's in it for the company? Or what's in it for the larger mission? Really, what's in it for the stakeholders? And that is one of the biggest difference of why clarity is a two-part string. We constantly ask for depth, but never ask for alignment. We will ask all the time if something makes sense, but we don't always ask the question of what do we think matters most that we can move with here? Or what do we think is most important? What do we think is most important that we can drive with as a first level of action? If there's something we needed to do first, what would it be? See, these are all alignment questions. And this is a perfect question that Mandy's asking, and I'm not, and so since Mariella caught it, I'm going to save it for the Q&A part. But what she just asked is not a clarifying question, but now this is a deeper question. There's a layer of concern with it. This is a deeper, like a question that requires like thought and feeling and something important behind it. So now we're at a point of belief, agreement. So now this is not a question around depth, it's a question around alignment. Real clarity is not that something makes sense. It's that it makes so much sense to them that they're willing to move with it. And as Scott mentioned, why does this matter to me? Or why does it matter to us? Or why does this matter to the way we need to move? This is an area we don't ask enough. And the last door that when we break through this wall enough is if we get through this, what'll happen is you don't even have to ask anymore because they will be loyal to you. And I'm going to give a good example. Many of you, we're going to test out this theory even right now. There is a layer of commitment and trust that people will follow you just because it's you. Just because it's you. There's this layer of trust. Now, it can be trust of expertise or trust of intention or trust of partnership, trust of commitment, but this almost advocation or conviction or partnership, it transcends the ask. Yeah, likability, Jeeves. Yes, I would say it's likability. It's to me, I would tie that almost to this sort of layer of intention that they trust your intention and that is what makes you likable. Integrity doesn't always make you likable, but it makes you somebody that, you know what, people didn't always like their platoon leader, but they always trusted that they did the right thing in the military, right? Or do you know what, this person, they weren't always the most likable, but they were always highly competent with the information that they provided. It was irrefutable. So I always say likability, I tie a little bit more with either intention or sort of a reputation. And so Chandler, Chandler's already pulling out the theory right now, which is good. Chandler's been to many webinars. So here is the layer that we're going to get into. Many of us, I would say, at a moment, there's 146 of us in this webinar. My goodness, that is quite a bit. Thank you for joining. I really do mean that. And all of you have stayed. So my first question is that there is a layer of captivation here. First question is, why have you stayed? Let's lean into it. Why have you stayed? Why have you stayed? Okay. Okay. Look where we're going. I've already learned something good. I like the information being shared. In-depth content, there's curiosity, there's already takeaways that I'm going to do something with. The delivery, the perspective. So in some cases, whether we realize in this case, you're already in a space on this triangle, whether we realize it or not. Some of us in a space of captivation, if you're going, I'm curious, this has me curious, right? This has me curious. I haven't left. I'm curious as to what I'm hearing. Right now, we're still in this rung of captivation. Others have not left. They said, I have gained information. I have gained knowledge. I've gained useful info. I have learned something. See where that goes? I have learned information. Good. Now We go to something else to where there's something. And see, now this is a big thing, right? This is other things coming in as they're going, I'm hearing things that I know I can take away and use tomorrow. This is now something that's going to make me successful in my workplace. What I learned specifically with connection and trust is something I can use now. See, that is alignment. That the movement and the buy-in, that is now. And somebody, I think it was Chandler that might have mentioned, and even Carlotta mentioned, you know what? I hate that I'm having to miss some of this live because I don't want to miss this and I want to come back. Regardless, it's almost like I'll teach you, I'll come to have you teach me how to tie my shoes a different way. It's almost something to where I know that if I go to see you, I trust you. That's the connection factor. And what's really great about all 147 of you in here, folks, is you have had that layer of impact on your stakeholders one way or another. There's some that you've just gotten to know and they're curious about the information you have, or they're curious about the way you've delivered messages, or you've delivered information. They're curious about what you have to offer. They have gotten to a point where you've shared information, but they might not be fully bought in to what proposal you're coming with, but they like what they're hearing, or they've partnered with you. They've bought into what you've shared. They've bought into what you've delivered. And there's some that you're like, boy, it doesn't even matter what I ask them. They've been with me for so long that we're in it together. How many of us probably agree with that? With a raise hand feature, how many of you could probably agree with all four rungs of that ladder? This is the reason why people connect and why people say yes to some and no to others. And so if the challenge exists to where it's like, well, no, I think they get it, right? Well, I think they get it, but I can't figure out why they're not saying yes. Then we have to go further. We have to ask deeper questions. We have to look for what the objections are. We have to ask for where the disagreement exists. Absolutely, Kalpana, you will get a recording of this webinar. So we have to look at this. And what we teach in this class on a further level is what those nuances really, really are. So as we go further, what I want to teach you is the magic, and it's not really a magic formula, but it is a deeper formula on the difference between the depth and the alignment. It's the six things that I truly look for that really get people to buy in or hold people back from buying in. It's the differentiation between that layer of depth and that layer of alignment. And it's so murky because it looks like clarity all around, but there's six factors as to what keeps people from buying in. Here they are. I look at it from an equation where the first three on the left need to be greater than the next three on the right. Anytime that I'm getting to know my stakeholders, I'm looking for six things that I need to get to know about my audience. So this ties back to the CYA model. And this is the A factor of what I'm looking for with my audience. So The first piece of the audience that I look for them is what do they perceive as valuable? So this is one of the big things that I always look for is the perceived value is what do they perceive to be valuable? So in some cases, what they perceive to be valuable are timelines. Others, it's the completeness of a scope. For others, it can be a streamlined budget. For others, I mean, there's many different variables. It can be a lot of things that are considered as value, but it has to be perceived in their mind. Mine is retention. It's great to get new business. Believe me, I love new business, but I can't tell you how much I really value retained partners. To me, that is perceived value. So when I try to work with people, my goal is not to work with you once. Plain and simple. So perceived value is where I live, but that's not where everybody else lives. So I have to look at it through their lens. So what do they perceive as valuable? The second thing is who do they already perceive as credible in the organization or outside of the organization? Who do they already perceive as credible? Who do they already listen to? Whose opinion do they already value? And why? So if I'm trying to get buy-in from a C-suite member or from a senior director or from somebody else, are they already listening to and why? What do they perceive as credible? And I need to ramp that up. Historical data, concrete data matters. Those three things I'm going to try to ramp up and increase as much as humanly possible. So, in a case with getting buy in for, I'll give you an example. We do proposals to go to conferences, to speak at conferences, to go to conferences. And one of the big things that it looks for is great, if you want to go to this conference, what's the perceived value of the conference? Well, perceived value is ROI, return on investment. That's perceived value. Okay, well, is there perceived credibility? Means who else is going? It's kind of like, Dad, I want to go to this party. Who all's going to be there? Right? That's perceived credibility. And do we have any historical data where we've seen success before? That's ups. On the downside, these are the things that get people to say no. Because you could have all the yeses in the world, but if the no's outweigh the yeses, then they're going to say no. So in this case, the first piece that I look for is perceived cost. What is their perceived cost? Rule of thumb. Cost does not always mean money. Cost can mean money, but it also can mean time, effort, resources. If I have to pull 5 people off of this, that's resources. If I have to extend my timeline, I may pay more upfront to do it quicker. So cost is really big, and I have to look at ways to reduce that cost. So how are you reducing my cost? And Taylor, you just said a very, very, very key thing is what is the cost of not doing this? That is known as hidden cost. Hidden cost is a really great thing to bring into play. The second thing that comes into play is perceived risk. Now, in risk management, I look for one thing we teach is what's called an AMTA strategy. We talk about four ways to reduce risk or to map out what your risk is, which is avoidance, mitigation, transference, and acceptable or accept. And so when you do that, you're looking for what risks you've already considered. And if you walk in and there has been no consideration of risk, the answer is immediately no. The other thing you have to pay attention to, not just with risk, is with fear aversion. What layer of fear is your stakeholder already walking into? Are they already risk averse? Are they already fearful of loss to begin with? Are they already not willing to give up control of things? Our greatest fears are loss and the unknown. And if there's people that are already heavily, heavily resistant against both, do you know that information already? What have you done to look into that? And if they are so averse to the fears ahead of them, what are you doing to reduce that? Where are you allowing them to still have control over X? Where have you made the unknown known to put their minds at ease? There's nothing better than saying, I know, Valerie, in this case, that you want to make sure that X, Y, and Z does not move forward without this at play. We have already considered this, and I want to put your mind at ease. There's nothing better than that. It's the alleviation of fear. This is what gets alignment. And the reason why is because it's fully geared on the concept of perception. And in their mind, perception is reality. That's what it comes down to. So my question goes back to something I asked very, very critically before, folks, is are you getting it or are you getting them? To tie that back to the triangle we're talking about, depth is getting it. Alignment is getting them. I want to take a small pause on this. What are your thoughts as you're seeing this? Are there any factors we haven't been considering as we try to go and meet with our stakeholders? Are there any things we're leaving off the table that isn't getting us alignment, maybe? How many of us are being this strategic in our considerations? And Michael, you're absolutely right. It isn't a straight line. There are unseen hurdles and outside forces. The goal is to try to bundle as many as we can, right? Hey, we know that this is an outside force. We've tried to prepare for this outside force as much as possible. That's why, with risk, mitigation is such a key factor in this, right? We've seen this, right? We've seen this. We have done as much mitigation as humanly possible. I think that's a really great point. And Dominic, you really do bring up a good point because some people are more risk tolerant. Some people are even more risk seeking. But do we know what the appetite for risk is? That's why fear aversion is such a key thing. Are they Like, are they really somebody that is just not very fearful and they're willing to dive into things? Or are they somebody that is just very hesitant on things? They're highly cautious. And Velvet, exactly. They stick with what is known because it's what they know. That's why change management sometimes is so difficult. I always keep these six things as almost like not a checklist per se, but if I'm not getting the alignment or the buy-in, I go to this and go, there's a reason. There's a reason that they're saying no to this. There's a reason that we're not getting what we need to out of this. What is it? And Lori, 100%. That's why there's cases to where, you know what, buy-in may have increased because you said something and it's like, no, I don't think I'm bought into it. But then you got somebody else that has influence over that person, and they said exactly what you said, and they're like, okay, I see it now. And you're like, I literally just said the same thing. But because you had perceived credibility from that other person, that buy-in came into play. Yes. And Scott, that's why business analysis becomes, and it's not, I would say, not only the business analysis, which is, yes, why data analysis and why that comes in, but also sort of that business relationship management comes into play because of the credibility and that value drive that comes into it too. Absolutely. This is really great stuff, folks. The last thing that I really want to get into that I think is really important is we want to make sure that strategically we're trying to do everything we can to speak a similar language to that stakeholder. So, what is the difference between when you're speaking somebody's language and you're not? What is the difference in that feeling? What is the difference in that approach? Yep, misinterpretation of requirements. We don't feel like we have their full attention. I love these answers, 100%. The vibe feels off. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's misaligned or it is aligned. Yep. There is this almost kind of like it's quiet or it's belonging, it's inviting versus it is, right? There's openness versus closed off. The body language will shift. Wrong assumptions. I would agree with that, Philip, 100%. The body language shifts. And so here is where, when we talk about different languages and different sort of characteristics of things, one of the things that I always really try to pay attention to in the art of persuasion is I try to look for where people's doors are. And so, in thinking about Aristotle, the first thing that I always try to talk about is we have all three of these doors. Okay. I don't, for 1 second, I don't want us to think that we have one and we don't have the other two. As human beings, we have all three of these doors. There is a craving of what gets our attention first in the way that we speak language to people. And so when we communicate, I think one of the biggest things is we look at the way that we communicate with others, and there's sort of this language that sort of comes out. And so there's sort of this approach that we're, and I don't like to mispronounce if it's Falguni or Falguni. I don't like to mispronounce. I truly don't. It's like one of my own personal pet peeves of mine, of my own. But there's sort of this language door that we communicate first. And it's whether it's purpose first or people first or process first, we have this language we communicate with others. And ethos is driven in sort of this purpose first door. It's a very fast driven door. It's mission, it's action, it's speed, it's movement. It's a very agile type of door. So it's quick moving, quick function, quick approach, quick movement. Um, they speak very belief driven, very like, we'll get it figured out, but we got to go. But it's about the purpose. It's almost kind of like people that communicate, ain't nobody got time for that. Let's do it. You have people first door mindset where they kind of get into, well, have we considered? And are we sure we all feel this way? And did we really consider everybody when we looked at this? It's a very much a people driven door first. It's good intentions, it's relationship, it's empathy, it's kindness. Then we have our process first door, which is driven much more in structure, reliability. It's driven in logic. It's driven more in accuracy and evidence, knowledge, competence. And so I look for language where people are either communicating with feelings, like I feel like, or I feel as if, or do they think, well, I think we should do X, or did we think about X? Or look, it's act and belief language, like we got to act on this, or I believe we need to do this. And we've heard this language many a times. But the disconnect in sort of that persuasion or that buy-in sometimes, and Sestogo, it absolutely can go to Kahneman. It really does. It does tie to this because some people like to move fast. They like to stay in that system one thinking, and others like to slow down. But there is this sort of preferential approach in the way that we like to move. And so the way that I try to view this is I want you to imagine that you're trying to meet somebody else where they are. If you're trying to really connect with somebody, you're trying to meet them at their doors. But in order to get to them, you got to unlock the right doors in the right order. So here's me, and there's another person here, right? And I need to meet them at their door. The first door is their captivation door. It's the first door that's going to hook them in. It's their first door of what language gets them to perk up. And the next door is their clarity door. Yes, Jeeves, and this is one thing we actually teach in a deeper part of this class is VIPs. We teach VIPs, values, interests, and preferences. It's a deeper thing. Yes. This is why we were getting a 1 hour snapshot of a 7 hour class. Yeah, we teach on the deeper things to look for. You nailed it. Yep. And you're right, it isn't super interchangeable all the time, Chandler. There are times where it will shift once we get what we want or once we get what we feel like we need. But the first door is the captivation door. The second door is the clarity door, and then we can open up to people and reveal the third door. So in sort of the archetypes of where people feel they may lead, and this is the homework for today. This is going to take a little bit of a deeper thought, but this is self-exploration is. I want you to think about where you yes, and the answer to this is yes, you get PDUs, you will get a PDU for this, and it is under power skills in the PMI reporting. So the I want you to think about where you may fit in this, and I will explain these archetypes and then we'll go to final questions. The first types of doors are your purpose door first. ELPs are the fastest movers of the bunch. They're the itchiest of movers. They are sink or swim type people. They are more direct in their communication. They like blunt honesty. They like their time saved. If they're not moving, they're dying. They want to move. Action, movement, save me time. These are the people that give them a 15-minute meeting, take 10 minutes, come ready, be ready to have a little bit of conflict because a conflict is not a bad thing and we're no hurt feelings, but we're going to get through it. That's a hunter and a mover. That's an ELP. EPLs are close to this, but they are a little bit more protective of the alignment of things. They're a little bit more protective of the alignment of things. They like to row the boat, if you will. I want to make sure, look, we're all still moving, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Are we still good? Okay, if we're not, what are we missing? Right? They're going to still take that step back, but they still want to move. They'll take people a little more under the wing, where ELPs are like, are you coming or not? PELs and PLEs. These are people first doors. PELs are fully about care, kindness, and empathy. They hurt when others hurt. They care when others care. It is not just about saving time, it's about making time. It is relationship build. The difference between a PEL and a PLE is that PELs are a little bit more vocal. They share the conversation with people, whereas PLEs are a little bit more quiet and reserved. They almost serve as the therapist. They sit back a little bit more. They may ask a question or two, and they help people get unstuck from their problems. They mirror, they inquire, they ask some questions, but they serve as almost a participant in the question, not as we're in the dialogue where we're going through it together, but I'm almost asking to make sure you're okay in what you're doing. That's the difference between a PEL and a PLE. LEPs and LPEs. LEPs are true mappers. They are color coders, organizers, you name it. I mean, it is everything has a system, everything has an approach, it has organization. They hate chaos. No chaos, none whatsoever. Everything has a plan. Every plan has a system. Every system has an organization. It is ones, twos, and threes, A's, B's, and C's. They think highly chronological, very, very organized. And LPEs, the difference between that is they don't view the world as sequential in their organization and logic. They view things as balance, or things weighing in a balance scape. So for them, it's okay, we've considered the pros and cons of this. Is it balanced? Have we considered this in the way that we move? They look for things to be balanced on the scale, that we've considered the multiple angles. So I know at first glance, I want you to think about where you personally are, not at work. And so examples can be yes, you can fit in multiple areas. You can fit in multiple areas, but I really want you to think about deep down if it was Burger King and you could have it your way, where would you really want it to be? All right, with that said, as people are answering this, and I love where it's coming in, let's go to some Q and A.
Absolutely, Jay. So we had a couple questions. Thanks so much for throwing all of these awesome comments and feedback and questions. Thank you so much for engaging to our awesome audience. First question here, referring to safe spaces for questions. What if our employees have been taught that it is not a safe space for questions?
Yeah, I think it depends on the position that we're in, right? If we are in the position of leader now, we can work on individualizing and changing the game. Meaning that if I was in a role before where the person before me did not want questions because there was a little bit of insecurity in the leadership. When I took over, for me, I came into this space to where I said, I not only really want you to ask questions, and I know this is going to be uncomfortable, but I really do want you to challenge if something isn't what you think it needs to be. And if we need to start one-on-one on that, I am fully supportive of that. And the way that they did that was they said, only way I'm going to do that is if I can record this. And I said, I will support it. And I had to own up to it. And so they were like, I don't know that I agree with this. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. And we did, and we talked about it, and they felt a lot better about it. But you have to lead by modeling the behavior you want. That's one of the biggest things. Now, if the leader is in the room and it's like that's the environment where it is, then what we have to do is maybe come up with a system like a parking lot, or we have to come up with a system to where those ideas still have to come out somewhere. So whether it's a shared doc or a shared Teams channel or a shared approach, but it has to come out professionally where it still goes out into an asynchronous environment is typically what I would recommend so that at least it's out there. Those would be the two spaces.
Some next steps. Yeah, absolutely. We had a couple more come in, and I saw a couple about the recording. You'll absolutely be getting an email after the webinar with the link to the recording. So be on the lookout for that just to go back and take some more notes. We had another question here. Would it be better to use informal conversations, such as lunch, to build rapport and learn how stakeholders think, what they value, and what influences their decisions?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of informal. I think that the more opportunity you have to once again just get to know them. I don't like forced dialogues. I'm not a huge advocate for those. Once again, one of the things we teach in the Mastering Meaningful Engagement course is the idea of VIPs, like really just taking time to learn people's values, interests, and preferences. And being able to learn that is really important. I just think that the more that you can take that time, the more that you can really get to know them.
Gotta get to know them. Awesome, awesome. Alrighty, we have time for maybe these last two questions.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for throwing them in, everyone. Is it possible to be a ELP at heart and yet need to be a EPL in my approach with my team?
Yes. And that's where, once again, I think it's okay to be honest with yourself. And I will tell you that I am an ELP. Truth be told, I know I am, but I know with my team, I have to soften my approach. And I learned that I needed to soften my approach. So I do lean much more EPL. And sometimes I have to even go a little further with individuals. So when I do that, I go more into even some PEL spaces if I need to be. So yes, that's absolutely when we talked about the first tenet of knowing where you are and knowing where you need to adapt.
Know thyself, right? I love it. Alrighty, last question here. Does a level of cognitive and emotional complexity have a role in these archetypes?
It absolutely does. I think that when it does have that sort of complexity, it's really the understanding that we are highly adaptable. But I think having and knowing where your home base lies, I think is always a good starting point to know where you can revert back to in case if that ship is sailing in a direction that feels highly uncomfortable. We are emotionally complex creatures. To say that I'm not empathetic is not true. But to say that I don't venture into the space of empathy from a complexity standpoint as much, yes, I probably don't. But can I? Sure. But I need to know where my home base is to start to know that that's where I need to go. So that's why, once again, knowing your home base is a really important starting point, I think.
Excellent. Alrighty. Well, that will be our last question, everyone. I went ahead and threw in our resource hub links. So if you want to learn a little bit more about watermark learning, a little bit more about mastering meaningful engagement or expanding your sphere of influence, go ahead and click on those links. And I also linked to all of our E360 webinars that are coming up. So be on the lookout for some more being added. We'll definitely be following up with you again with the recording link. So thank you all so much for being here, for participating, for learning, and for throwing all of your amazing thank yous in the chat because thank you so much, Jay. This was a really great session.
I appreciate it as always. Thanks for having me and thanks for joining everybody. It's so good to see so many of you join me on these.
Excellent. Alrighty, well, have a fantastic rest of your day and week, everyone, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.